Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Suhaib Saeed speaking. That's me in an old picture. And I'm the head of quality and guidance at Quran Reflect. You have probably been made a follower of my account, and I hope you don't mind. But my role is to help you and to support you to grow in your ability to reflect upon the Quran. And I hope that what Allah has given me and allowed me to study of His book and of the methods of explaining and interpreting that book will help to shed some light on what we're trying to do together. And together with the team at Quran Reflect, I'm very interested to learn from how people are reflecting. And we've had this activity throughout the month of Ramadan, which is called Quranic Maxims. So on day one, this is the post that I have left for you. And you can see that there's been a good amount of engagement around this activity. Many people have joined this activity as first time reflectors. And then there's other people who have already been posting their own reflections who have joined in. And I have read every single post that has been shared in this activity. And I try to read everything else on the site. And may Allah make it easier for me to do that and to engage with everything that's going on, because it is not only about trying to ensure quality and trying to fulfill our responsibility towards users of the site to make sure that everything is authentic and within the bounds of what's acceptable to say about the Quran, but also, as I already hinted, there is just so much to learn from different perspectives that are shared about the Quran, about ayat, and the impact that they have on us as individuals. So the Quranic Maxims activity is based around these short phrases of Quranic guidance, which I've selected based on the idea that they are somehow self explanatory, that they are easy to grasp and to understand, and that they have an applicability to lots of different situations. So I want people to understand the original context in which that phrase appears in the Quran. But I also want you to think about how could these words be applied to other situations as well. So it's been really good to see the participation and the various ideas. And what I've done in order to help us benefit from the experience that we've had together is I've selected a few of the reflections from each day, and I'm going to make these into week by week videos, showing the best of what has been discussed. I say best, but I don't actually want you to take that word too seriously. The ones I've selected, let's say that they've got some particular angles which are useful for me to explore and explain in this video. But I want to make it short enough to get through. And I don't want anyone to feel that if you weren't selected, that that means anything um, fell short in your comment or your contribution at all. So the first one we had was, "It is He who named you Muslims." So as always, of course, we attach the ayah, and you are invited to read the ayah and to explore it and to think about all the things that are said in the ayah. But we want to focus in particular on the phrase itself. And as I said here, the original context is about following the religion of submission, the religion of Islam, Muslim, the way of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. But what does it mean that he has named you Muslims? What does it mean to each of us reading it? I invite you to have a look at the post and to look at the comments underneath. But mostly I'll be looking at separate posts that were made with this hashtag Quranic Maxims. And I want to see some of the interesting points of view that were shared. So what I'll do is I'll close these as we go through. So S, and unfortunately I don't know your name, but S here has talked about a response of gratitude. And that's a very important aspect of what we're suggesting that we do here on Quran Reflect. When we reflect, one of the simplest things that we can all do is think about how it has impacted us on an emotional level, and then to share that and express that in some words that others can appreciate. So knowing that Allah has made us Muslim and has named us Muslim leads to an attitude of gratitude. Then we have Amrit, our sister, as part of the team here at Quran Reflect, and she's talked about, the experience that she had in picking names, right? So thinking that when we choose names, we want things that people can look up to and strive towards. and that identity to be connected to something good and positive. So, just reflecting back on that, I've said here that when the name carries a meaning, we want to aspire to those meanings. And that's why we as Muslims should aspire to live up to this name, which Allah chose for us. Then we have Halima, and she has said, this ayah is so close to my heart. It gives me an identity and is full of gems. So, what we have here is this really nice account of how, in the whole ayah, although it's not tagged here, I can fix that. But the ayah itself has this flow of concepts, right? So it mentions that He has chosen you, Allah has chosen you. And then it is the way of your forefather, Ibrahim, alayhi salam. It gives me my identity and who I should look up to. It is He who named you Muslims. That's an honor. And that honor comes with responsibility. But that responsibility is not too burdensome and onerous upon us, because He also says in the ayah, He has not placed upon you any hardship in religion. And the purpose would be that you be witnesses over humanity. So, as well as the identity, it is laid out the tasks and establish prayer, pay zakat, and hold fast to Allah. This is related to how to fulfill the task. So, this is an interpretation, a reading from Sister Halima. She's not saying that she's a mufassira. I don't know if she's a mufassira, but this is not about claiming that this is the meaning, but it's about saying this is how the flow of ideas appears to me. And that's within the scope of what we would accept and expect that people can engage in at Quran Reflect. And of course, we share these things for review and for feedback as well. At this point, I could let you know that on some of these maxims, I've sometimes written some prior things. I have this article called Islam, What's in a Name? It's a Quranic study. And, looking at the usages of the word Islam or Muslim in the Quran, I summarized that it is a meaning of peace and that it is a historical name. And we looked at, we can look here at all those who have been described as Muslims before and since the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It is a divine gift. And some of your reflections reflected that point. It is a way of life, as we've said, that it contains a responsibility, something to live up to. And it is a universal message. So these are some things that I can link for you, inshallah, in a post. Right, so let's move on to day 2. مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدُ وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. Whatever you have will end, but whatever Allah has is everlasting. Here we've got a bit of a limitation with the translation. We have one translation, the Clear Quran translation, which is displayed on our site. You can go and look at other translations as well, or you can look at Arabic commentaries if you are able to do so, or whatever language, and you can get a further appreciation of the way it's worded. So you can see this as being what is with you is running out, and what is with Allah is everlasting, right? So let's see what people have shared. Sister Sarah or Sarah, sorry if I'm not sure, has looked out at some of the linguistic aspects of it, right? So one of the nice observations that she's made is that yanfadu is a verb, so it is running out, or it runs out, it is always running out. And baqin is in the form of a noun, so it has the stronger sense of permanence. It is lasting, right? So that translation kind of reflects that whatever you have will end, but whatever Allah has is everlasting. So the translation does a fairly good job in that respect. Uthman here has shared very nicely that I deeply connect with this ayah because of a situation that often happens to me. This is a model type of reflection, by the way. We don't need you to always think about grammatical points and points of tafsir and so on. That's great, but the first thing we should be doing is thinking, what does it mean to me on a personal level? So he says, when I'm around the people I love and I'm having a good time, I often wish that time stops. But reality soon catches up. We separate and I feel sad. And even after that, I have nostalgia, right? And I said that I relate to that so much. And that's why this life, with all its joys and pains, it's important for us to see it for what it is. Brother Akhtar, dear friend and student of mine, he has mentioned this hadith. He wasn't the only one, but he quoted it in full. And this is one of the things that I already connected to this ayah in my own reflections, which I didn't share on Quran Reflect. So I was just hoping that someone else would, so I can thank them for that. Right, there you go. Thank you for sharing this hadith. So look how the Prophet ﷺ has responded to a point that was made by his wife Aisha radiallahu anha when they had slaughtered a sheep and then they donated it to others. But they kept one part with them, which was the shoulder of the sheep. So when he asked what remains of it, she said, nothing remains of it except its shoulder. Now the Prophet ﷺ turned that round and corrected her wording to think about it from another dimension, right? The dimension of the hereafter. He said, all of it remains except its shoulder. In other words, what has been given to others, what's been donated, remains with Allah. You see, ما عندكم ينفد وما عند الله باق. So from this we can get the idea, how do we make something عند Allah? How do we transform something from being with us to being with Allah? How do we deposit it in the bank of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is a really, really beautiful hadith, especially when you read it in light of this ayah. And finally, for this maxim, Khalida has said, you know, it's a really nice sort of poetic reflection. Do you ever wonder how perfumes are made from flowers? Flowers have a short life, but when it is crushed and its essence extracted and a complex process is applied, it becomes a long-lasting thing, right? At least in comparison to the flower. So life, if left unprocessed, passes away. But if we, you know, so there's an idea here. If we put our life into processing steps to extract benefits for the hereafter, then we can secure those benefits with Allah. Okay, so that sort of sets some thoughts bouncing around in my head, and they're not fully thought out, and that's okay, as long as we are clear about where we're being speculative. So I said, you made me think about how we in the next life might be seen as the essence, right? The extract, the perfume made from all the pressures we lived in this one. So I don't know what you think of that. Let's move to day 3. This is an ayah which talks about some rules that were connected to the pilgrimage, rules that were observed in the period of ignorance and were cancelled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They used to go in through the back door. Now, to understand that, and I haven't explained it at length in this comment, you might have to go and look at a work of tafsir, right? You could go and see Tafsir ibn Kathir, for example, online in English translation, even though it's abridged, and you would find this background information. But we want to look at how this phrase has a broader significance. It becomes a saying, it becomes comparable to, but of course better than, you know, a proverb or just a saying, a piece of wisdom that people circulate. So we can say in all sorts of situations, we can say to someone and remind them, وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا, enter homes through their proper doors. Now for this one, I'm not going to open up lots of reflections that were shared, but I want to look at one that came in the comments that I really liked. This one is in Arabic, and we do have support for the use of Arabic in reflections on the site as well, of course, and more languages, and inshallah there will be more to come. But in terms of being able to moderate things, English and Arabic is the limit that I have at the moment. So Brother Hamidi, maybe, or Hamidi, has shared something very nice, which I'll translate for you. He basically said that this is the reason that I am here on this site. Okay, because my purpose is to seek knowledge from its people. And so, you know, they're saying here that they know that at Quran Reflect, they can have feedback from scholars who can help to nurture those reflections. So everything, you know, every goal that you might have has a route and a way to reach it. So we are not supposed to look for things from the wrong people. Okay, we don't come at things from the back, but we come at things from the front. So whoever is trying to do some kind of action, and then they come at it from the right door, and then they apply effort and follow the right method to get to it, then they will get to that purpose by Allah's permission. Okay, so as I've said, in reply to that, we ask Allah to make this site a door, one of the doors of goodness and knowledge of His book, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there were some really nice reflections on this, which we won't go to, but there were really interesting thoughts about what it means to be a person who comes at things through the front door, right, in all openness and all transparency. The next one, day 4. If an evildoer brings you any news, verify. So this is a very lofty principle in our religion, and we can understand the original context in which it was revealed, and that helps to explain why this the specific word fasiq or evildoer is mentioned. But beyond that, it is a principle of verifying, of checking things, and not spreading things without making sure that we have a proper source for it. So let's look at some of the things that were said about it. Our brother, Dr. Muhannad, has shared an analysis of individual words, which is very useful. So the fasiq, in a way, could be anyone because there might be people that we don't know who they are. So how are we supposed to be sure that the news that they're bringing is trustworthy? But in reality, the principle here needs to be thought about more carefully, as even what I said can be misunderstood. Because we should have a good opinion of people, we should assume good of people. But if we don't have a track record of a person and they're saying something of great weight, right, that has a lot of implications, then you don't just say, oh, well, this anonymous person on Twitter has said it, right? Anonymity has got its dangers, right? So although it can sometimes be used for good purposes or due to necessity, at Quran Reflect, we really are aiming for a much more transparent way of doing things, because we should be able to attribute statements to those who say them. But we discussed a little bit in the comments about the word naba, that maybe the word naba conveys the idea of something which is a significant piece of news, right? Because you don't want to harm any group of people due to any kind of ignorance, right? So there's a really nice analysis of the words here. Our brother Omar has also shared something, and it's very nice to see that he's a young brother. He will have turned 18. Happy belated birthday. And he's talking about the context that he sees this applying to in rumors which spread in school. So there's a lot of detail here in the reflection, but the basic idea is that you need to take care of these things and address rumors at their root before they spiral out of control. S, I think we saw a reflection from S earlier, mentions that a perspective as a graduate in law, and that's what we really like. We want to see your individual perspective. It might be based on your study background or your work background or whatever it may be, just aspects of your life that shed light on these meanings. So we have our duty of care to not harm each other. You don't necessarily have to have criminal intentions to be penalized for what you've done. Carelessness is a blameworthy trait in and of itself. That's so well expressed. And that is exactly it. Don't be people who think, well, it's not my fault anyway. I'm just, I'm just forwarding something I received. And, if it's wrong, then someone else is to blame. And what S also did was related this to the story of Ifk, or the slander of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, which is a very instructive example of how things can spread out of control. Sister Khalida, finally, okay, she took it on a different angle, right? So in a way, this is a little bit like a kind of ishari explanation, which is to say a kind of allusion, because that's allusion with an A, by the way, not with an I. Here she's reading it as if the fasiq here in the ayah is her nafs, okay? Now, obviously, that's not what the ayah is saying directly, but the principle and the guidance can be extended to this. So your own nafs, your own self is giving you ideas and making you have negative opinions of people, for example, your own husband, right? So you should be asking your nafs then to verify. And there are, this description within Quranic terminology and in the works of the scholars about different levels and types of the nafs. right? But this was an interesting reflection. And the last one that we'll touch on in this video is day 5. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be mindful of Allah, have taqwa of Allah to the best of your ability. So I think that people found this a very touching one. It's not that people won't have heard this ayah before, although that might be true of some people, but also just to home in on a few words at a time is a really effective way of encouraging reflection. And that's what we're trying to do in this month, and then, of course, in all the months that follow, inshallah. So we had something very useful from Saeed Purcell, who's an Imam, and he has said here that in his khutbah, he has mentioned the connection of this with another ayah. And here we are. It is tagged, he's tagged it in his post, in which Allah Azza wa Jalla says, have taqwa of Allah as He deserves, right? Be mindful of Allah in the way He deserves. So there are narrations which have talked about how the companions reacted to that, and they said, how are we going to fear Allah as He deserves? You know, His right upon us is so great, we could never match up to it. So when this other ayah was revealed, it became a source of comfort, right? Because, you know, you just have taqwa of Allah as much as you can, right? You're striving for what Allah deserves, but Allah knows what you are capable of. Sister Sun, another very valuable member of our team here at Quran Reflect, has related this to her day-to-day activities and intention when carrying out such tasks, right? So as much as you can also mean in whatever sphere you can, right? In whichever area that you are actually operating in. Maybe you're not responsible for running a country, but you have responsibility. Look, there's some things mentioned, cleaning the house or doing the dishes. Any one of us could be doing these day-to-day actions. Are we thinking of Allah, remembering Allah, being conscious of our duty before Allah? For example, not wasting water. Doing things in the best way is a way of drawing closer to Allah. Our brother Abbas has always got very useful angles and interesting angles, and always presents a challenge to me as well. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. Something very beautiful that he said here. Well, he's raised a question, you see. My remark, isn't striving for Allah's reward also not a kind of selfishness because you want it for your own self? So this is a slightly tangential, but of course we don't mind here at QR that you would raise questions. Inshallah, we're thinking about how we can make a means for you to do that in a way that doesn't have to be in the middle of a reflection post. But, you know, questions that come up while you're reading, as long as you're not doing that in order to try to confuse others, then we appreciate that. So maybe what did I answer? I didn't. Striving for Allah's reward is for yourself, of course, but that's not called selfishness. But that's a separate point. The thing that I was going to reflect on here is that we are in an age of reckless and egoistic competition. Only the very best who attains perfection will get it. No shortfall is tolerated. Whereas Allah is saying, you know, He recognizes that you have your limits, right? But I pointed out that also there is another trend in modern society, which is about accepting yourself as you are. Don't change a thing. Love yourself. You're perfect. And even though we can appreciate the good intentions behind such words, we have to be careful not to take them to an extreme where we forget about striving to be one's best self and to be pleasing to the Creator. Finally, we have here from Bint Abdul Malik or Abdul Malik, at the end of it all, when I go and stand before my Lord, the only thing that matters is that He knows in His divine knowledge that I tried my best. Right? So this is a message which I hope that we will reflect upon as we are striving in this month of Ramadan. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. We're reciting in every ayah, you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. And we ask Allah for help in performing our worship. And our sister has shared very beautifully a dua of forgiveness, which we should learn. It is called Sayyidul Istighfar. And if we learn this one, we see that there is within the words, I am trying to fulfill your covenant as best as I humbly can. but I acknowledge the gap between your immense blessing upon me and my sinful state. So, this is a really nice commentary on that dua. And in these nights, which among them is Laylatul Qadr, when we're saying, Allahumma innaka afuwun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. Oh Allah, you are the pardoner and you love to pardon, so pardon me. There we are moving the focus from our own actions. We are no longer mentioning them, but we are only mentioning the fact that Allah is the one who loves to pardon. So may He pardon us all in this month of Ramadan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.